Ever feel like the internet, like the whole thing, is held together with like digital duct tape?
Right.
And the sheer willpower of coding wizards.
Yeah.
Well, today we're diving into a story that reveals just how fragile that balance can be, right?
Yeah.
We're talking about WordPress.
Okay.
The platform, it powers, like you wouldn't believe it, a mind-boggling percentage of the websites that you visit every single day. And this is about the clash of the titans at its core.
Yeah. It's a fascinating case study, really.
It is.
You've got Matt Mullenweg,
Right.
the co-founder of WordPress, CEO of Automatic,
Good cheese.
going head-to-head with WP Engine,
Okay.
a giant in the world of WordPress hosting.
Huge.
And this isn't just a war of words. It gets into trademark disputes,
Oh, really?
accusations of sabotage,
What?
and a whole lot of tension within the open source community.
So much tension.
Yeah.
So before we get into the nitty-gritty, let's set the stage for those who might not live and breathe WordPress. We're talking about a platform that's used by everyone from, hobby bloggers
Right.
to Fortune 500 companies.
Yep.
So when there's a rift this big at the top, it sends ripples throughout the entire online world.
It really does. And what's particularly interesting is how this conflict really kind of lays bare the inherent tensions within the open source model itself, right?
Okay.
WordPress, at its heart, thrives on collaboration,
Right.
with thousands of developers contributing to its code base.
Yeah.
But this situation raises questions about what happens when a single entity like Automatic holds a significant amount of power within that ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost Shakespearean, isn't it?
It really is.
The very success of this collaborative creation leads to a power struggle that could threaten its future.
Yeah.
So how did this whole saga begin?
Oh, man.
Take us back to the beginning.
Well, like many epic feuds, it all started with a seemingly minor disagreement, really. Matt Mullenweg, in a move that surprised many, took to his personal blog to call out WP Engine's level of contribution to WordPress.
He did.
He did. Specifically, he took issue with their participation in the Five for the Future program,
Yep.
an initiative that encourages companies benefiting from WordPress to contribute back to its development.
Five for the future.
Sure.
It sounds almost utopian, doesn't it?
In theory, yes.
Yeah.
The idea is that companies like WP Engine,
Right.
who directly profit from WordPress's popularity,
Yep.
should dedicate a portion of their resources, around 5%,
Okay.
back to the project.
Got it.
This could be in the form of developer time, financial contributions, or other resources.
Sounds reasonable enough.
Oh.
So what was WP Engine's response to this very public call out?
Well, they argue that they contribute in significant ways outside of the Five for the Future framework.
Oh, okay.
They pointed to their sponsorship of key plugins,
Right.
like the popular WP GraphQL plugin,
Okay.
and their development of tools that benefit the broader WordPress community. Essentially, they claimed their contributions were more about quality over quantity.
So it becomes a debate about how we define real contribution in the open source world.
Exactly.
Who gets to decide what's valuable,
Right.
what's not?
Yeah.
And perhaps more importantly, what are the consequences of not falling in line with those expectations?
Precisely. And that brings us to what many in the community saw as a significant escalation of the conflict. Matt Mullenweg's decision to modify the WordPress trademark policy.
Oh, wow.
Specifically, he changed the rules around using the acronym WP.
Now, this is where things start to feel a little more, strategic,
It certainly raised eyebrows. Matt claimed he made the change to prevent confusion,
Okay.
even citing an anecdote about his own mother mistaking WP Engine for an official arm of WordPress.
Oh, wow.
But the timing, coming right on the heels of his public criticism of WP Engine, led many to believe it was a calculated power play.
It's like changing the locks on the community center after a disagreement with another member, isn't it?
That's a good way to put it. And this move had very real consequences for companies like WP Engine, requiring them to jump through additional hoops to use the WP acronym in their branding and marketing materials. It essentially gave Automatic more control over how others could operate within the WordPress ecosystem.
So we've gone from a disagreement about contribution levels to a potential weaponization of the WordPress brand itself. You can see how this would create a lot of anxieties within the community.
Absolutely. And it set the stage for an even more dramatic escalation. WP Engine's decision to file a cease and desist letter against Automatic and Matt Mullenweg personally.
Okay, that's taking things to a whole new level. What were the specific accusations in this cease and desist?
WP Engine alleged a pattern of harmful behavior,
Okay.
claiming that Matt's blog posts contained misleading information intended to damage their reputation. They also accused Automatic of unfairly banning WP Engine from WordPress.org, a move that could have significant implications for their visibility and reach within the community.
So it's not just about Five for the Future anymore.
No.
We're talking about accusations of defamation,
Right.
attempts to stifle competition,
Yeah.
and a potential abuse of power within the WordPress ecosystem.
Precisely. And it's worth noting that WP Engine didn't stop there. They also accused Matt Mullenweg of something that, if true, would strike at the heart of the open source ethos, modifying the core code of WordPress for his own benefit.
Wait, hold on.
Yeah.
Modifying the core code. We're talking about the foundation upon which millions of websites are built. That's a serious accusation.
It is. It's important to note that Matt vehemently denies this allegation, calling it categorically false.
Huh?
However, it highlights the level of distrust that had developed between the two parties. This wasn't just a war of words anymore. It was a battle for control over the future of WordPress itself.
And how did Matt Mullenweg respond to these serious accusations? Did he back down?
Not in the slightest. In fact, he doubled down, publishing his own blog post where he defended his actions and launched a series of counter-accusations against WP Engine. He claimed that WP Engine was prioritizing profits over their users,
Okay.
going so far as to disable key WordPress features to cut costs.
This is like a digital tennis match with accusations flying back and forth across the net.
It really is.
What were these key features that Matt alleged WP Engine was disabling?
One of the most prominent examples he cited was the disabling of revision history, a feature that allows users to track changes made to their websites and revert to previous versions if needed. Matt argued that disabling this feature put WP Engine customers at risk, potentially jeopardizing their content and workflow.
That's a pretty fundamental feature for content creators, especially those working collaboratively. Imagine losing hours, days, or even weeks of work because you couldn't revert to a previous version of a document.
Exactly. It was a savvy move on Matt's part. By focusing on a feature so crucial to the daily workflow of many WordPress users, he effectively turned the narrative around, painting WP Engine as a company willing to compromise the user experience for the sake of their bottom line. And remember that WP GraphQL plugin?
Yeah.
WP Engine was so proud of sponsoring.
Right.
Well, Matt acquired it.
It's a way.
Right in the middle of all this drama.
Oh, wow. Talk about adding fuel to the fire.
Right.
It's like he's playing chess while everyone else is playing checkers.
Yeah.
What message do you think a move like that sends to other companies operating within the WordPress ecosystem?
It certainly sent a shockwave through the community.
Yeah.
Some saw it as a strategic business decision,
Right.
with Automatic consolidating its control over a valuable piece of the WordPress puzzle.
Yeah.
Others saw it as a more aggressive move,
Okay.
a way for Matt to further marginalize WP Engine
Right.
and assert his dominance.
Wow.
Yeah.
And let's not forget about the secure custom fields situation.
Right.
That's got to be one of the most controversial chapters in this whole saga.
Oh, absolutely.
Can you remind us what happened there?
Absolutely. Advanced Custom Fields, a plugin originally developed by WP Engine,
Right.
was incredibly popular amongst WordPress users.
Yeah, it was huge.
It provided a powerful way to customize websites beyond the standard features.
Okay.
Matt, again citing security concerns, decided to essentially duplicate this plugin,
What?
rebranding it as Secure Custom Fields and promoting it heavily through official WordPress channels.
So he essentially created a direct competitor to a plugin developed by the very company he was publicly feuding with.
Yes.
I imagine that didn't go over well.
You're right, it didn't. The original developers of Advanced Custom Fields were furious. They accused Matt of hijacking their work,
Wow.
using security as a pretext to undermine a competitor and potentially confuse WordPress users in the process.
Wow, it's one thing to disagree about contribution levels or trademark policies, but to directly replicate and potentially devalue the work of another company within the same open source community feels like crossing a line.
That's precisely how many in the community felt. It brought up deeper questions about fair play, the ethics of competition within open source, and whether mass actions were ultimately harming the collaborative spirit that had always defined WordPress.
Right.
Yeah.
It's almost ironic, isn't it?
Yeah.
A platform built on the idea of shared ownership and communal development becomes the battleground for conflict over control and influence.
It's a classic case of unintended consequences.
Yeah.
The very success of WordPress,
Right.
its widespread adoption and its commercial viability created a scenario where the stakes of control became incredibly high.
Yeah, and as we've seen, these high stakes led to some pretty dramatic confrontations.
Yes.
Not just in blog posts and legal documents, but also on social media.
Oh, yeah.
There were moments where this whole thing felt less like a tech feud and more like a reality TV show.
That's a fair assessment. There were some truly bizarre moments that played out in the public eye. Like that time when Matt, during a live podcast interview, seemingly got a nosebleed.
Wow.
But just kept talking as if nothing was happening.
It was surreal. And then there were those Twitter exchanges where he would dismiss critics,
Oh, yeah.
sometimes quite bluntly,
Yeah.
even getting into it with former Automatic employees.
Those moments, whether intentional or not, painted a picture of someone seemingly detached from the concerns of the community.
Yeah.
It created a sense that dissent was not welcome,
Oh, wow.
that loyalty to Matt's vision for WordPress was paramount.
And it seems like those who dared to voice dissenting opinions faced real consequences.
Yes.
We saw reports of prominent WordPress contributors being banned from official channels for expressing support for WP Engine or criticizing Matt's actions.
Exactly. And that's where this conflict goes from a battle between two companies to something that impacts the entire WordPress community. It creates a chilling effect where individuals and organizations might hesitate to speak freely for fear of retaliation or exclusion.
Which is completely antithetical to the spirit of open source, isn't it?
It is.
The idea that anyone can contribute, criticize, and collaborate openly is kind of the whole point.
It's fundamental, and this situation exposed a vulnerability within the open source model. When you have a single entity, even one led by someone as influential as Matt Mullenweg, wielding so much power, it can stifle dissent and create an environment where critical voices are silenced.
So how did the broader WordPress community respond to all of this drama? Were they taking sides?
The community, as you can imagine, was deeply divided.
Yeah.
Some were firmly in Matt's corner, applauding his efforts to hold WP Engine accountable for what they saw as insufficient contributions to the platform they profited from.
They probably saw him as a protector of WordPress,
Right.
fighting to ensure its long-term health and sustainability.
Precisely. But then there were others who felt deeply unsettled by Matt's actions. They saw a concerning pattern of behavior that suggested a consolidation of power, a willingness to silence dissent, and a blurring of the lines between personal ambition and the best interests of the WordPress project as a whole.
It's a tough situation to navigate.
Yeah.
You have the founder of this incredible platform, someone who's clearly passionate about its future, potentially using his influence in ways that make people uncomfortable. How do you even begin to reconcile those conflicting emotions?
That's the million-dollar question,
Right.
and it's something the WordPress community is still grappling with today.
So we've got this fascinating and incredibly complex situation.
Yeah.
A platform built on open collaboration grapples with accusations of power consolidation, a trademark dispute, and even allegations of code manipulation.
Right.
Where does this leave WordPress?
Right.
And maybe more importantly for our listeners, those of us who rely on it every day.
Yeah, it's a critical question.
It is.
And there are no easy answers.
Right.
What's clear is that this conflict exposed some fundamental tensions within the open source world,
Yeah.
while many celebrate the collaborative spirit of open source, right?
Right.
This situation highlights the potential risks when a single entity, even one born from the project itself, amasses significant influence.
Because it's not just about who's right or wrong in this specific feud, right?
Right.
It's about the larger implications for the future of open source projects.
Exactly.
If something like this can happen with WordPress, it can happen anywhere.
Absolutely. And it raises questions about how to better safeguard open source projects from these sorts of conflicts.
Like what?
How do you ensure a balance of power, right?
Right.
Prevent any single entity from exerting undue influence
Right.
and create mechanisms for resolving disputes fairly and transparently.
It seems like a tricky balance.
It is.
Too much control in the hands of one entity can stifle innovation
Right.
and create an environment where people are afraid to speak up.
Yes.
But without some level of centralized leadership, things could descend into chaos.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And that's the tightrope walk that many open source projects have to navigate.
Right.
This situation with WordPress underscores the importance of clear governance models,
Yeah.
mechanisms for community oversight, and a commitment to transparency from those in positions of power.
Because ultimately, the health of these projects depends on trust, doesn't it?
It really does.
Trust between the core developers, the companies building businesses around the platform, and the millions of users who rely on it every day.
Absolutely. And once that trust is eroded, it can be incredibly difficult to rebuild.
Yeah.
We've seen the fracturing effect this conflict has had on the WordPress community,
Yeah.
with some feeling alienated, others feeling vindicated,
Right.
and many just feeling uncertain about the future.
So what happens now? Where does WordPress go from here?
Well, legally, the lawsuit filed by WP Engine against Automatic is still making its way through the courts.
Okay.
It will likely be a lengthy and expensive process,
Right.
and the outcome could have significant implications for both companies.
And beyond the legal battle, are there signs of healing within the community? Are there efforts to address these deeper concerns about power dynamics and open source governance?
There are definitely conversations happening. Many prominent voices within the WordPress community are calling for greater transparency from Automatic,
Okay.
a more inclusive decision-making process,
Right.
and a renewed focus on the needs and concerns of the broader user base.
It sounds like a critical moment for WordPress. This could be an opportunity to not just recover from this conflict, but to emerge stronger and more resilient.
It certainly could. And I think it's important for us to remember that despite this conflict,
Yeah,
WordPress remains an incredibly powerful and versatile platform.
it does.
Millions of websites continue to rely on it.
Yeah.
And the open source community surrounding it is vast and talented.
So what's the takeaway for our listeners today? If we're using WordPress, working with it, or just fascinated by the inner workings of the internet,
Right.
what should we be paying attention to as this story unfolds?
Pay attention to the ongoing conversations about open source governance.
Okay.
How can we create structures that foster both innovation and accountability? How do we ensure that the voices of all stakeholders, not just the most powerful, are heard?
And maybe, just as importantly, how do we as users and members of these communities educate ourselves about these issues and advocate for the kind of future we want to see for the open source projects we rely on?
Exactly. This situation, as messy and complicated as it is, can serve as a valuable learning experience.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that even the most successful open source projects are not immune to conflicts over power and control.
Wow.
And it's a call to action for all of us to engage in these conversations and work towards creating a more equitable and sustainable future for the open source world.
Because ultimately, a more open and collaborative internet benefits everyone.
I agree.
So keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep into the fascinating and sometimes messy world of technology.
Right here.
We'll be back next time with another deep dive, exploring the stories that shape the digital landscape. Until then, stay curious.